Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming out this morning. So today I'm going to be talking about Kickstarter, obviously. I'm going to talk about what it is, how people have used it for journalism specifically, and some kind of tips on how you can use it yourself if you're interested in running a project. So my name is Nicole He. I do journalism outreach at Kickstarter, and we are a company that's been around for about 6 years now. We are based in Brooklyn, New York, and we have, this is from our team page, and this is just a few of the people that work at Kickstarter. We have about 110 employees now. About half the people work with building the website and the product, and half the people work with talking to the community. So what is Kickstarter? Kickstarter is pretty simply a place where people come to create things to share with others. We see that the most successful projects on Kickstarter usually come in with a community already in mind. So Kickstarter is a really big creative ecosystem where people make things like books and movies and magazines and gadgets and restaurants and so forth. So we have 15 different categories that span the creative world, and anything that fits in one of these categories fits on Kickstarter. So as I said, we've been around for almost 6 years now. In that time, a lot of crazy things have happened. So there have been over 82,000 creative ideas that have been brought to life on Kickstarter, with over $1.6 billion pledged just in these last few years to making them happen. But more importantly, Kickstarter is really a community of people. So it's a vibrant ecosystem where people come to be a part of something. So they're not just making things, but they're also supporting them. Our community includes 8.3 million backers, so those are people who have supported a Kickstarter project, and 2.5 million of those people have backed more than one project. And when you see that out of those repeat backers, who are the people who have backed more than one project, over 250,000 of them have pledged to 10 or more projects. So we see the majority of the money pledged on Kickstarter actually comes from this really vibrant community of people. I think this is really cool because a lot of times people discover Kickstarter because they're supporting their friend's project or their uncle or their cousin or somebody that they know. But more and more we see people kind of come to Kickstarter and to support someone they know, but they also look around and find something that inspires them, and they want to back that too, even if they don't know the person at all. So Kickstarter has really become a household name where people come to discover new creative work. Our community represents nearly every country on this planet and all 7 continents, including Antarctica. But these projects are not just funded, they've also had a really big impact on culture. So for example, projects funded on Kickstarter are nominated for and win awards all around the world. Like this film, excuse me, won an Oscar in 2013. And Planet Money, which is a podcast on NPR in the States, funded a t-shirt project, actually, which was part of this interactive media story that they did. And after this Kickstarter project, and they did the whole thing, and it was really beautiful, they won an Emmy for it, also in 2013. Art funded on Kickstarter is exhibited at all sorts of institutions around the world, like the MoMA, the Whitney Biennial, the Walker Art Center, the Smithsonian, and so forth. But projects aren't just shown in institutions, they also become institutions themselves. So this is a map of just in the States, but a lot of the movie theaters and restaurants and coffee shops and food trucks that have been funded on Kickstarter that are now out there in the real world. And we have heroes like LeVar Burton, who is really big in the States. With the help of 100,000 people, he brought Reading Rainbow back for the next generation. And projects go to space. There have been over a dozen Kickstarter projects that have actually launched into space, including this pizza that the band Anamanaguchi sent into space last year for a music video. So how does all of this actually work? Before you get started, you should make sure that your project kind of meets our rules. Excuse me. So we have 3 rules that are pretty simple. The first is that your project has to fit into one of our 15 categories, and it's about creating something to share with others. The second is that we ask for clear and open communication from backers, because you're inviting a community of people to be a part of your project, so you should be able to talk about it. And the last thing is that Kickstarter is exclusively for creative projects, so we don't do kind of general fundraising, we don't do charity or cause funding. And you can't offer, equity or anything that's like heavily regulated or dangerous, like guns and weapons and porn and things like that. So if you haven't seen it before, this is what a project page looks like on Kickstarter. And one thing that's really important to remember is that we use something called the all or nothing funding model. So the way it works is that you see this project back here. This guy wants to lock himself in a cabin to record an album about how to be happy. And so he has picked a goal of $5,000 and a certain time frame in which to raise it. So the way all or nothing works is that if you don't meet your goal in the time frame you pick, which is usually around 30 days, there's no money transacted. So no credit cards are charged, and yeah, you don't get any money, but we don't take any money or anything like that. And so you can see with this project, for example, he set his $5,000 goal. He's raised about $4,000, and he has 4 days to go on his campaign. So if in the next 4 days he doesn't raise the last remaining $1,000, none of the 93 backers, none of the 93 people who have already supported this project would have their cards charged. The good news is that pretty much all projects that get this close to their goal will make it. So why do we do this? Some people find the all or nothing concept to be kind of scary, but we do this because it works. We find that people raise a lot more money this way. There's a few reasons. The first is that if you set a funding goal and you know that you won't be able to collect money unless you raise it, you as a creator are probably a lot more likely to work a little harder to try to raise that money. But it's also compelling for your backers because if they know that their pledge will actually make a difference in whether you get to do your thing or not, they're also much more willing to support you. And it's just less risky. So if it costs me $10,000 to fund my investigative story as a journalist, for example, but I only raised $5,000, without the all or nothing funding model, I would still be expected to produce $10,000 worth of work, but I only have $5,000, and I probably wouldn't be able to do so. And yeah, the last thing is that it's just compelling. A lot of times there's kind of this clock counting down scenario. There's a little bit of drama, like will they make it? And usually they will make it if they get that close. So across our site, we see 40% of projects reach their funding goal, which I think is actually pretty high. But diving into that a little more, we find that out of the projects that don't reach their goal, 17% of them don't get a single pledge. So that means many of the unsuccessful projects don't succeed because they launch and then they don't put any effort into their project. Like they didn't tell anybody about their project. Like you didn't even tell your mom about your project if you got 0 pledges, So, on the flip side, we see that projects that launch and make an effort actually have a really good chance of reaching their goals. So we have this thing that we call the tipping point. We see that projects that reach just 20% of their goal succeed nearly 80% of the time. And actually, we found that if you get just 25 backers, that's just 25 people, you have a 75% or more chance of succeeding as well. So, a lot of times when you hear about a Kickstarter project, you hear about the things that are in the news, these like huge $1 million projects. But the reality is that most of them are pretty small. So most projects on Kickstarter raise between $1,000 and $10,000. And this is this is important to keep in mind if you're setting kind of expectations about and thinking about running your own project. So I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about journalism on Kickstarter, but all those stats that I just mentioned, many of them are actually publicly available on our site. We have a stats page that's basically constantly updating if you're interested in checking that out. So journalism on Kickstarter, I think it's a really interesting new category for us, well, because it's new. So as I said, Kickstarter has these 15 different creative categories, but journalism is one of the newest ones. It was launched only in the middle of last year. And it had existed previously on our site, but we decided to really elevate it and kind of nurture this community on Kickstarter. So there's already been over $15 million pledged to journalism, periodical, and podcast projects. And I think this is pretty exciting because there's still a lot of room for people to kind of grow and experiment with how they can fund journalism on Kickstarter. So I'm going to show you a few examples of some of the successful projects that we've already seen. And you'll see that they kind of span from, independent reporters funding stories, to people launching new publications, to people making tools for journalism. So this is a project called Belling Cat by this guy, Elliot Higgins, who's also known as Brown Moses. So he has done a lot of investigative citizen journalism and did a lot of impactful work on Syria. So he wanted to kind of take it to the next level and launch a website to kind of host his work and also have a place to teach people who are interested in also becoming citizen journalists how to get started. And he had about 1,700 people support that. Danielle Smith and Elliot Wilson were kind of well-known hip-hop journalists back in the States. They wrote for Billboard and Vibe and Rap Radar, but they felt that the media landscape was missing a space for kind of multicultural teams to create beautiful print magazines, so they decided to do it themselves, and they came in to Kickstarter to launch this magazine. And of course there's Matter, which began as a long-form science and technology magazine online that launched and had an extremely successful Kickstarter campaign. And they've now recently kind of found a new home on the website Medium. So this guy, Colin McDonald, actually ran two projects to fund a story that he was doing, which was to travel along the Rio Grande River and report on the impact of the changes to the environment and the people. And his reporting is still ongoing, and it's hosted online at the Texas Tribune. But not all projects have to raise a lot of money to have a big impact. So the Alaska Teen Media Institute raised about $4,000 just to keep their public affairs radio program on the air and to host shows from like a live studio audience. So basically they ran this pretty small project, but it allowed them to continue to teach teens about how to do radio stuff. So why does Kickstarter work? One reason is because every Kickstarter project is a story. Kickstarter is a really powerful storytelling tool to engage your community in your creative idea. So before you begin your project, it's really important to think about the story that you want to tell. And it's not just a platform where money rains from the sky for no reason, but it's a place again for you to engage with your audience and tell them why what you're doing is really important. So there's three ways people tell their stories on Kickstarter. There's the video, rewards, and updates, and I'll get into each one of those things. So the first thing is a Kickstarter video. It's really important, and they're usually pretty short, around maybe 2 minutes these days. But when you're crafting it, you should think about who your audience is. And it's important. The most important thing about the video is not that it has to be this extremely fancy or high production value kind of thing, is that it should be authentic to who you are and kind of tell the story about why what you're doing is important, why you care about it, and who you are. So I'm going to show you a montage of some of our kind of favorite project videos that have been cut together in a way to reflect the typical video on Kickstarter.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
What's up, people?
Hi.
Hey. Hello. I thought we were gonna do hello.
Hi.
I love your new shoes. Are those new shoes?
Hi, my name is Raquel.
And I could go on, but this is a Kickstarter campaign video, and I haven't even told you what my project is yet.
So
The idea is this.
I'm writing a book.
A feature film.
Stop motion animations.
Sci-fi music video album.
Let people actually be able to buy a couture dress that they themselves design.
I want to make a new graphic novel, and I want you to get some original art.
This time I decided to write things that were more lyrical.
I hope to make something strange and unique for you to enjoy.
I made a film called Codependent Lesbian Space Alien Seek Same.
Right now, I'm sitting on over 200 hours of incredible footage.
I'd like your help to complete it.
Cut out all that extraneous stuff, all those extraneous costs, and get to the point, which is simply more art in front of more people.
The last piece of the puzzle is going to be you.
We cannot do this without you. We can't.
We need you to be a part of this. This is a collaborative experience.
If you back this Kickstarter project, you will be cool and everybody will like you.
I want to make a show that you don't just watch. Something unpredictable, strange, and maybe even amazing. So let's do this thing.
I'm really excited for this. I think that this is worth doing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our Kickstarter video.
Let's go make a story.
We can make it together.
Yeah, so you can see from that it was a lot of faces, a lot of people kind of being themselves. Like sometimes they're articulate, sometimes they're awkward. Like all of it is pretty much okay. And yeah, again, it doesn't have to be extremely fancy, but it can be too if you are a fancy person. But again, the most important thing is to tell your story again. Okay. So the next way people tell their stories on Kickstarter is through the project rewards. So it's not just a place where you're like, I need money, please give me money, and people give you money for no reason. If somebody gives me $10, I give them $10 worth of something in return, but it's up to me to define what that is. So usually, you offer a copy of the thing that you're making. So for example, if you're making a magazine, you will offer them a copy of the magazine. If you're doing a film, you can offer them a digital download or a DVD. But even better than that is kind of an experience-based reward. So, people really love to have kind of early access or behind-the-scenes kind of thing. So again, if you're making the film, in addition to giving them a copy of the film that you're making, you can invite them to a work-in-progress showing. You can thank them in the credits, or you could even name a minor character after them or something like that. So on our site, we see that $25 is the most common reward tier that people pledge to. So this is a really important one to think about. Not that you have to do $25 exactly or something like that, but just that we see that a lot of people are willing to support projects at this level. And that's kind of the place where you will bring a lot of people in. But we see $100 is also really important here because it's the one that tends to generate the most money for creators. So even if there are fewer people that back at that level, it's also a really important one. So journalism projects sometimes have this challenge, if, say, what they're producing is going to be available for free on the internet afterwards, which is pretty common for many journalism projects, what kind of rewards can you offer? So I'm going to show you, again, some examples of what different journalism projects have done. So back to Bellingcat, which was that open source citizen journalism site. Basically, the main thing that he offered was beta access. So for £5, this was a British project, you could get beta access to the site. And then each of the rewards that he offered kind of after that had included the beta access. So for £50, you got beta access, but also this investigative starter kit, which was basically kind of a kit on how to get started in citizen journalism, if that's what you're interested in. And for £250, you get to have kind of a one-on-one conversation with him and a bunch of other things. Also the question of what if you're not producing a physical object, what can you offer people? And people have done some really interesting things. So this was from the podcast creator, Roman Mars. He ran 3 very successful Kickstarter campaigns for his podcast called 99% Invisible, which was about the design world as it exists in our daily lives. So, excuse me. For each of these projects, he asked his favorite designer to create a series of illustrated notebooks based on some of the themes of his most popular episodes. And so even though what he was making was a podcast that'd be available for free on the internet, he managed to come up with kind of a creative and interesting reward that was related to what he was doing, that was tangible, that people really liked. Sorry. All right, another great example is from this project by the Center of Investigative Reporting. So they did this thing called a FOIA machine. Basically, you can see it now, it's a website that allows journalists or writers or like anybody really to easily access government records. So basically, it's like always this very difficult and like bureaucratic process in the States and elsewhere, I imagine, to request records from the government, but they made it really easy to do so. So again, this is a thing that's free and available for anybody to use, but they still came up with a really kind of special reward. They had a bunch of good rewards, but one of them was the $75 reward tier, which was this classic FOIA memento it's a letter from J. Edgar Hoover citing the danger posed by John Lennon. So they had, this was $75. This is something that's like really special and interesting and unique that they could offer, and they sold out of this reward. So, as I said earlier, you want to offer kind of special one-of-a-kind experiences as well. So at the higher reward tiers, you can do things that are really interesting. So this one guy, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's like this weather or something. This one guy was using drone photography to investigate factory farms, and this was his project. And for $1,000, he would spell your name out in a creative fashion with the drone, and take a picture of it with the drone. And so this is something that's like kind of really interesting and a kind of a unique way for people to get involved in this. And he limited this reward tier to 3 backers, and it also sold out. So the last thing is project updates, which are kind of a blog and a newsletter, like rolled up into one thing. So the way that works is that if someone supports your project for any amount of money, so even if they just back it for $1, they are automatically subscribed to your updates. So it's a good place for you to kind of share news about your project and what you're doing and what's going on with the project, and send notes to your backers about the progress and things like that. So I'll show you some examples of that. So this is kind of a typical like thank you video from DECA, which was this journalism cooperative. They launched a project to bring their reporting to digital devices. So this is just kind of a basic like thank you so much for supporting us kind of update. These are examples from live projects to kind of keep people in the loop about what's going on. So the one on the left is from this project called Femsplain, which is a website to promote like female identified people's like writing and content. So this was, I think, just an update from the first day. They say thank you so much, wow, like for your support. And here are some publications that have written about our project. The one on the right is an update from FOIA Machine where they say, today we have a 30-minute live call, like join us for this. So it's a good place to tell people like what's going on. It's also a good place to introduce new rewards to your backers. So this is from this project called the Knoxville Mercury Launch, where they were starting a new local newspaper. And this is a place where they use this update to introduce kind of new higher tier rewards to kind of encourage their backers to maybe increase their pledges or to share with their friends. And after funding ends, it's also a good place to keep people in the loop about what's happening. So the one on the left is from a documentary about photojournalism in Afghanistan, and they showed kind of this like small clip to their backers. And the one on the right is a project called Live Streaming the Race for Governor by the Texas Tribune. So basically, they got all this live streaming equipment so that people could watch like all the things that were happening. And so this is kind of an update saying like, thank you, like look what you helped us, be able to do. And of course, once your project is finished, you can announce that and invite them along with whatever's happening next. So this is an update from the project run by PolitiFact to live fact check the State of the Union in the States. That just happened a couple months ago. So I keep using this word, backers, like who are these people? I mean, in this picture, it's from that NPR project that I mentioned earlier for the t-shirt project that they won an Emmy for. Like all the backers got t-shirts and they took pictures of them. So the people who back your project are, most of them will probably come from your own outreach efforts. So either, they're your friends and family, first of all, but they're also your fans and people on your email list, people that are your kind of existing readership. And the good news is you already know who these people are. You know how to speak to them, like what channels they're on, and how to communicate with them and what kind of rewards they would like. And this is important to keep in mind when you're planning your project. But another thing that I want to point out, especially for journalism projects, I think, as you can see, as I showed you earlier, Kickstarter is not just for journalism, it's also for music and technology and art and fashion and all sorts of things. But I think this is actually a huge advantage for people running journalism projects because you get this wide community of people who will find your project that otherwise wouldn't. So, it's not just going to be your existing readership or audience that's supporting your project. It's going to be a diverse kind of group of people from all sorts of places that want to back your project. So I think this is kind of one of the advantages of using Kickstarter compared to, say, just running a crowdfunding campaign on your own or maybe using one of the journalism-specific crowdfunding websites, is that we have this huge community of people that will grow your readership. And yeah, so it's important to keep in mind that your backers are not just kind of a faceless crowd, but they are people and a community of people. So I hope that was helpful. These are kind of just general tips. A lot of these a lot of the things I said are available on our site in the Creator Handbook. So you should check that out also if you're thinking about launching projects. And this was none. Okay, so yeah, and feel free to, we'll do questions right after this, but if you want to email me, I'm more than happy to answer your questions there as well, or if you have an idea for a project and want to talk about it or get feedback, I'm also more than happy to help you with that. And as for, of course I should mention this because we're here, as for the countries that we're open in, we are, yeah, so we are not yet open in Italy, but you should stay tuned, and can't say much more than that, but it'll happen pretty soon, and so you should stay tuned for the news on that. And when we do launch in Italy, which again will be coming up, that's probably a good time for you to launch a project if you're thinking about it, because we will be doing a lot of editorial featuring and promotion of those projects from this country, Italy. Yeah. So yeah. You have any questions?
I have three questions. The first one is, what's like the average number people ask for in the journalism section of Kickstarter? The second question is, what's the percentage of projects being funded in the journalism section of Kickstarter? And the third one is, what's better of Kickstarter to Indiegogo? So now it's your pitch to beat your competitor.
Yeah, so your first question was, how much people ask for? I don't have the exact stats on that. I would say it varies a lot. I'm seeing a lot of projects around the $20,000 to $30,000 level, but for the type of project that's maybe like launching a new publication or doing a magazine or something like that. Of course, there are projects that are much smaller, and then there are projects that try to go bigger too. But I would say right now that's like, I wouldn't say that's the average, but I'm seeing a lot of the interesting projects launching around 20K or so. Your second question was what percentage are funded, and I don't have that stat either off the top of my head, but it's on our it should be on our website.
What's roughly?
I would say it's probably around the average, which I said is 40% across the site. But again, that's not necessarily indicative of your chances, because if you're in this room, I would say your chances are much higher, because as I said earlier, we see that if you put a little effort into your project, if you get just 25 people to back your project, your chances already shoot up to 75%. And your third question was about Indiegogo. So there's a few differences between Kickstarter and Indiegogo. One of them is that Kickstarter is focused on kind of the creative world in a very broadly defined way. Indiegogo allows all types of projects. So they have charity, cause funding, and all sorts of other things. But it's kind of important for us at Kickstarter to focus on things that are creative, and therefore our community wants to support those types of projects. The other thing is that I think Kickstarter really is a bigger platform and kind of more well-known. And also the all or nothing thing makes a huge difference. We find that with our all or nothing model, you will raise a lot more money that way. And there are lots of like independent studies that have shown this, that if you come to Kickstarter, you will probably raise more money. Questions? Yeah.
I have a question about local project.
Which project?
Local project.
Local project?
For example, if you want to start a local journalism project in Perugia, maybe in Italian language, obviously, maybe Kickstarter isn't the right place the right platform.
Yeah, well, so when we do launch here and in other countries in Europe, we will have local language. We'll have localization in terms of language. So people here would be able to see your project in Italian. People in the States would be able to see it in English or whatever our other languages. So I would say that you would kind of have the benefit of having a global audience to your project, as well as having, whatever local community wants to support your project too. I don't know if there might be a local, like, Perusian crowdfunding website that I'm unfamiliar with, but I think, you have the benefit of having kind of a large and kind of well-established community that would allow you to, it certainly wouldn't stop you from, promoting it locally. And also people that come from here would see that project pop up because we have kind of a in your area feature, things like that. But then you also have the benefit of having a local or a global community as well. But we do actually see a lot of local projects from small towns all across the world. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there's no other questions right now, you can just find me after, or you can email me, and yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything. So, thank you.